Rome, sans BC. The Bestias bridge over the Tiber River. A man kneels on the cold stone, naked and shaking. He has just killed his mother. The executioner has brought forward a leather bag, but it is not empty. Inside, moving against each other, are a dog, a rooster, a monkey, and a snake, all alive. They beat the prisoner with blood-red sticks until his back is covered with torn skin. Then they force him into the bag with the animals. They sew it closed while he screams. The dog tears at his skin. The monkey scratches at his eyes. The snake bites again and again, putting poison into his shaking body. And while he suffers in pain, they throw the bag into the river. Cicero himself explained the reason behind this punishment. Let it be denied sky, sun, water, and earth. Let the person who killed the one who gave him life lose all those things from which life itself comes. Each animal was chosen for its meaning. The dog represented shamelessness. The rooster represented pride. The monkey represented evil. And the snake represented the poisonous hatred he felt toward his own family. His body would never be buried. His soul would never find peace. This was called Poena Cullei, the punishment of the sack. And this is not made up. It appears in the 12 Tables, Rome's oldest set of laws dating back to 450 BC. But the sack was only the beginning. Rome perfected 12 methods of torture designed to destroy the body, the spirit, and sometimes even the memory of its victims. Not the gladiators, not the wild animals of the Colosseum. You already know those stories. Today you will see what Rome did outside the arena. The punishments saved for traitors, deserters, cowards, and impure Vestals. What your history teacher never mentioned. What Hollywood would never dare show. I am Crown and Dagger. And here there is no holding back. Only the truth Rome wanted you to forget. If you want history without filters, hit like and subscribe now, because what comes next makes the Colosseum look like a children's show. And this raises a question. Why did Rome create such complicated punishments? Because simple death was never enough. Every torture was designed to send a specific message. The crime decided the punishment, and the punishment had to be unforgettable. The philosopher Seneca understood this after watching executions firsthand. He wrote, "I come home more greedy, more cruel, more inhuman because I have been among humans." This was not justice. This was propaganda written in human flesh. Let us begin with how Rome executed those who betrayed her. From the top of a cliff in the very heart of the city, where the screams of the falling could be heard by senators and citizens alike, the Tarpeian Rock stood on the southern top of the Capitoline Hill, rising about 80 feet above the rocks below. It looked over the Roman Forum, the beating heart of city life, where senators debated and citizens gathered. For Romans, there was no more meaningful place to die. The rock was named after Tarpeia, a young woman who allegedly betrayed Rome to the Sabines during the city's earliest days. She agreed to open the gates in exchange for what the soldiers wore on their arms, meaning their golden bracelets. Instead, they crushed her beneath their shields, teaching Rome its first lesson about the price of betrayal. From that moment forward, Tarpeian Rock became the chosen execution place for traitors. The process was brutally simple. The condemned would be led to the cliff's edge while crowds gathered below to watch. Then, without ceremony, they were thrown from the edge. Their bodies broke on the rocks in full view of the Forum, a horrifying reminder to every Roman citizen of what waited for those who betrayed the state. The historian Livy records that in 384 BC, Marcus Manlius Capitolinus, once a hero who had saved Rome from a Gallic invasion, was thrown from the rock after being accused of wanting to become king. His crime was not merely ambition, but betraying the republican values Rome held sacred. The symbolism was deliberate and devastating. Traitors were literally cast out from the center of Roman society. Their broken bodies left where citizens could see them, denied proper burial, and thus denied peace in the afterlife. Archaeological evidence suggests that the area below the cliff built up so many human remains over the centuries that it required regular clearing. Emperor Claudius reportedly attended these executions personally, taking what Seneca described as twisted pleasure in examining how the bodies had landed. But the Tarpeian Rock was saved for Roman citizens who betrayed their own. For slaves, foreigners, and the lowest criminals, Rome had created something far more drawn out and agonizing. Crucifixion was so brutal that Roman citizens were legally protected from it. This punishment was saved for those Rome considered beneath human dignity: slaves, pirates, rebels, and enemies of the state. The condemned would first be stripped naked and whipped with whips embedded with bone and metal until their backs were unrecognizable. Then they were forced to carry the crossbeam called the patibulum through the streets to the execution site, falling under its weight while crowds jeered and spat upon them. At the site, executioners would drive iron nails through the wrists and feet, or sometimes tie the victim with ropes designed to make suffering last longer. The cross was then raised, and the condemned was left to die. Death came slowly, usually from exhaustion and suffocation, as the victim struggled to push upward to breathe. The process could take hours, sometimes days. Roman executioners developed special techniques to extend the agony, including a small seat called a sedile that prevented victims from suffocating too quickly. Seneca, who witnessed many crucifixions, wrote, "I see crosses there, not just of one kind, but made in many different ways. Some have their victims with head down to the ground. Some pierce their private parts. Others stretch out their arms." The most infamous mass crucifixion happened in 71 BC after Spartacus' slave rebellion was crushed. The general Marcus Licinius Crassus ordered about 6,000 captured rebels crucified along the Appian Way, the main road from Rome to Capua. For 200 kilometers, travelers passed thousands of dying men, their agony deliberately made longer by skilled executioners. Plutarch recorded that the bodies remained on their crosses until they rotted away, a warning that lasted long after the screaming had stopped. The message was clear: this is what becomes of those who raise arms against Rome. While crucifixion punished outside enemies, Rome had developed something equally terrifying for its own soldiers who failed in battle. And this punishment forced brothers to kill brothers. Decimation. The word itself comes from the Latin decimus, meaning to take a tenth. When a legion showed cowardice, mutiny, or terrible failure in battle, they faced group punishment designed to create maximum psychological damage. The process was organized and merciless. Soldiers would be divided into groups of 10, often men who had trained together, fought together, eaten together for years. Each group would draw lots, and the soldier who drew the shortest straw would be beaten to death by his 9 companions. Not by executioners, by his own brothers in arms. They used clubs and stones, raining blows upon a man they had called friend until his skull cracked and his body stopped moving. The centurion Titus Pullo described it as a lesson written in blood that no soldier ever needed twice. The survivors faced additional shame. They were forced to camp outside the safety of the fortifications and live on barley instead of wheat, marking them as disgraced men unworthy of proper Roman rations. One of the most documented cases happened in 71 BC, the same year as Spartacus' defeat, when a legion under Mummius engaged the rebels against orders and suffered defeat. Crassus brought back this ancient punishment, which had fallen out of common use. 500 men died at the hands of their comrades that day, their screams echoing across the camp as a lesson to the remaining legions. The military writer Frontinus noted that units which had been decimated often became Rome's fiercest fighters in following battles, desperate to redeem themselves and remove the stain of their punishment. The poet Lucan captured the horror in his epic Pharsalia. Chance became the decider of doom, and the luck of the lot depended on death. The psychological impact was so severe that some soldiers reportedly chose to end their own lives rather than participate in killing their comrades. Others formed blood bonds, promising not to survive if one of their group drew the fatal lot. Desperate attempts to preserve their humanity within an inherently dehumanizing system. But decimation, as terrible as it was, still offered 9 out of 10 soldier survival. For individual military failures, Rome had created something with no chance of escape. Fustuarium, the punishment of the clubs, waited for soldiers who abandoned their posts, lost their weapons, or showed individual cowardice in battle. The condemned soldier would be led before his assembled legion. Every man he had served beside was forced to witness what came next. The tribune would lightly touch him with a cudgel, a ceremonial gesture that served as the signal. Then every soldier fell upon him with clubs and stones. The military writer Vigetius noted that this punishment created such terror that facing the enemy in battle became less scary than the certainty of death at the hands of one's own comrades. Polybius, writing in the 2nd century BC, described the aftermath. Even those who manage to escape are not saved thereby. They are not allowed to return to their homes, and none of their family would dare receive such a man in the house. The public nature was crucial. It forced soldiers to participate in the killing, making them part of it. After witnessing or delivering such brutality, they would never consider desertion themselves. Pause for a moment and consider what we have covered so far. Traitors thrown from cliffs, rebels crucified by the thousands, soldiers beating their brothers to death in decimation, individual cowards clubbed by their legions in fustuarium. And we are only 4 methods in. Which of these punishments do you find most disturbing? The randomness of decimation, the drawn-out agony of crucifixion, or the symbolic horror of the Tarpeian Rock? Drop your answer in the comments because I want to know where you draw the line, and we have not even reached the arena yet. Damnatio ad Bestias. Condemnation to the beast transformed execution into spectacular entertainment. This punishment was saved for slaves, prisoners of war, and the worst criminals, those Rome deemed unworthy of a dignified death. The Colosseum's underground network, called the Hypogeum, contained 32 animal pens and 80 vertical shafts. Trapdoors allowed beasts and condemned prisoners to appear magically in the arena, creating theatrical entrances that heightened audience excitement. These executions were often staged as mythological reenactments. A criminal might be dressed as Orpheus and sent into the arena with a lyre promised that his music might calm the wild beasts. For a brief moment, the animals would seem calm. Then a bear would be released and maul him to death, creating a grotesque parody of the original myth. The poet Martial witnessed such spectacles and praised them in verse. What was a mere fable when performed on stage becomes reality in our arena. During Emperor Trajan's celebration of his Dacian victories in 107 AD, games lasted 123 days. 11,000 animals were killed alongside thousands of condemned criminals and prisoners of war. Lions were starved for days before being released, driving them into a frenzy. Bears were poked with hot irons until they became mindless with rage. The uncertainty of whether the beast would strike fast or toy with its prey kept the stands howling for more. The crowd cheered as men were torn apart. Vendors sold wine and snacks, while children watched from their parents' shoulders. People placed bets on how long each victim would scream before dying. This was lunch entertainment. Equally theatrical, but perhaps more terrifying, was vivicrematio, burning alive. This punishment carried religious meaning as Romans believed fire cleaned the pollution of certain crimes. Emperor Nero elevated burning executions to performance art during his persecution of Christians following the Great Fire of Rome in 64 AD. His executioners would coat victims in wax or pitch to make them burn more slowly and brightly, extending their suffering while providing better light. Tacitus describes the scene in his annals. Mockery of every sort was added to their deaths, covered with the skins of beasts. They were torn by dogs and died, or were nailed to crosses, or were doomed to the flames and burnt to serve as nightly light when daylight had expired. These human torches, as they came to be known, lit Nero's gardens while he drove his chariot among them, simultaneously playing the role of executioner, audience, and performer. The site of these burnings, Nero's gardens on Vatican Hill, ironically later became the location of St. Peter's Basilica, transforming a place of Christian martyrdom into Christianity's most sacred site. For crimes requiring spectacular destruction of the body, Rome employed pulveratio, death by crushing. Elephants trained to kill with agonizing precision became instruments of exotic punishment. Pliny the Elder described their capabilities. They can be taught to walk ropes, to throw missiles, and even to kill on command, crushing a man limb by limb as directed by their handler. This controlled destruction allowed executions to be made longer for maximum entertainment value. The condemned would be forced to fight the beasts with minimal weapons before inevitably being crushed beneath feet that could put out thousands of pounds of pressure. During the Punic Wars, captured Carthaginian generals faced death beneath the very war elephants they had once commanded against Rome. Some prisoners were dressed in enemy armor, allowing the elephants, trained to attack specific colors in battle, to act out miniature recreations of Roman military victories. The writer Aelian recorded one execution that went spectacularly wrong. An elephant refused to kill a condemned man who had once been its keeper, trumpeting in protest instead. The crowd, moved by this display of animal loyalty, demanded the man's pardon. Emperor Claudius reluctantly granted it, demonstrating how even execution as entertainment could sometimes yield unexpected mercy. But for those Rome truly wanted to erase, physical death was not enough. They needed to destroy something more fundamental: memory itself. Damnatio memoriae. Condemnation of memory struck at what Romans feared more than death: being forgotten. When the Senate ordered this punishment, it ordered the systematic erasing of the condemned from history. Statues would be destroyed or recarved with new faces. Names were chiseled from inscriptions. Wills were canceled. Even mentioning the person's name could become illegal. The poet Horace captured Roman obsession with legacy when he wrote, "Non omnis morior," "I shall not wholly die," expressing hope that his works would survive him. Damnatio memoriae sought to extinguish precisely this hope. Emperor Domitian suffered this fate after his assassination in 96 AD. The Senate ordered his statues destroyed or reworked. His name scratched from public monuments, his coins melted down. Officials carefully worked to remove all traces of his existence, as if he had never ruled Rome at all. Archaeological evidence of this erasure remains visible today. In the Roman Forum, inscriptions bearing Domitian's name show clear evidence of deliberate damage. The paradox is haunting. We know about these erased individuals precisely because the effort to remove them was so thorough that it became noteworthy. The obvious absence became a presence of its own. Now we return to where we began, but with the full horror revealed. Poena Cullei, the punishment of the sack, was saved almost exclusively for parricides, those who murdered their parents or close relatives. For Romans, this crime represented the ultimate betrayal of pietas, the sacred duty owed to one's family and ancestors. The ritual had ancient origins in the 12 Tables, Rome's earliest legal code. The condemned would first be beaten with blood-colored rods, then sewn into a leather sack alongside the 4 symbolic animals: the dog for shamelessness, the rooster for pride, the monkey for evil, and the viper for poisonous hatred. This macabre group would then be thrown into the Tiber River or the sea. The punishment denied the condemned contact with the basic elements of creation. No earth for burial, no air to breathe, no water to drink. Symbolically removed from the sun's light upon being sealed in the sack. Cicero, arguing a famous parricide case, explained the philosophy. They want him unable to have sky, sun, water, or earth, so that he who killed the one who gave him life should lose all those things from which all living things got their life. The punishment created a twisted new family for the condemned in death, trapped forever with beasts rather than the honored ancestors he had betrayed. While Poena Cullei came from Roman tradition, scaphism represented a torture the Romans adopted from the Persians and changed for their purposes. It was saved for crimes considered to put the entire community at risk: sacrilege against religious sites or betrayal of military secrets. The condemned would be stripped naked and fastened between 2 boats or hollowed logs with head, hands, and feet sticking out. They would be force-fed milk and honey until developing severe diarrhea. Then their exposed skin would be covered with honey to attract insects. Left floating on a stagnant pond, unable to move, covered in their own waste, the condemned would be slowly eaten by insects while still alive. Death could take weeks. The Roman historian Plutarch described the execution of a soldier named Mithridates by this method, noting he survived an astonishing 17 days before death finally claimed him. The mere threat of scaphism was often enough. When Emperor Aurelian captured Queen Zenobia of Palmyra after her rebellion in 270 AD, he threatened her with his fate. The normally defiant queen immediately gave in to Roman authority, choosing comfortable exile over such horror. Fire has always held double symbolism as both purifier and destroyer. Romans used this duality in mors per ignum lentum, death by slow fire. Unlike simple burning at the stake, which could be mercifully quick, this punishment deliberately made suffering last longer through careful temperature control. The condemned might be placed in a bronze bull, hung over low flames, gradually roasted on a metal grid, or partially dunked in boiling oil. In the Roman colony of Lugdunum, modern Lyon in 157 AD, the Christian martyr Blandina was roasted on an iron chair over carefully controlled flames as part of public games. Witnesses recorded that she remained conscious and speaking throughout much of the ordeal. The jurist Ulpian classified death by fire as summum supplicium, the ultimate punishment, and recommended it particularly for arsonists, poisoners, and practitioners of magic. Perhaps most psychologically terrifying was the punishment saved for Vestal Virgins who broke their vows. Live burial. The procedure was elaborate and deeply symbolic. The condemned priestess would be dressed in funeral clothes and transported in a covered litter to the Campus Celeratus, the field of transgression near the Colline Gate. There she would be placed in a small underground chamber provided with minimal food, water, a lamp, and a bed. The provision served an important legal fiction. Technically, Rome was not executing the Vestal, but creating conditions where she would die naturally, thereby avoiding divine pollution from directly harming a consecrated priestess. Once sealed in this chamber, the Vestal was left to choose between ending her own life quickly or suffering slow death by starvation in absolute darkness. The most famous victim was the chief Vestal Cornelia, condemned by Emperor Domitian in 91 AD despite her claims of innocence. As she was led to her living tomb, Pliny the Younger recorded she maintained perfect dignity even when her dress caught on the ladder leading down to the chamber. When the executioner offered his hand, she pulled away as if from pollution, preserving her purity even in her final moments. She continued calling upon the gods, saying nothing more frequently than, "Caesar thinks I am unchaste. I, who have performed sacred rites while he triumphed and ruled." Archaeological excavations near the Colline Gate have uncovered small chambers consistent with historical descriptions, some containing remains of female skeletons alongside oil lamps and deteriorated food vessels. We have now witnessed 12 methods Rome perfected to punish, terrorize, and control. Traitors thrown from cliffs, rebels crucified by thousands along Roman roads, soldiers beating their brothers to death in decimation, individual cowards clubbed by their legions in fustuarium, criminals torn apart by beasts for entertainment, heretics burned as human torches, enemies crushed beneath elephant feet, memories erased from history itself, parricides sewn into sacks with poisonous animals, spies eaten alive by insects over weeks, victims roasted slowly over controlled flames, and sacred priestesses buried alive in darkness. Seneca the Younger once observed, "He who has made the inflicting of punishment his trade tries to find pleasure not in having punished, but in punishing." Perhaps in this thought lies Rome's darkest truth, that these elaborate penalties served purposes beyond justice. Today, the Colosseum stands as a monument to human engineering. Tourists photograph its arches and marvel at its size. They buy souvenirs and pose for pictures where 50,000 once screamed for blood. But walk through its tunnels at dusk, and you might hear echoes, iron gates creaking open, beasts roaring in their cages, the shuffle of condemned feet on sand already stained brown from previous spectacles. 50,000 voices rising as one while someone dies for their entertainment. The stone is easy to admire. Harder is remembering its purpose, learned cruelty rehearsed until it felt normal. Rome's punishments were not about blood. They were about control, shaping how citizens thought, feared, and obeyed. Every execution, every torture, every erasure served one end: to make power look eternal. That is the warning carved into the ruins. A civilization that glorifies violence eventually crumbles beneath its own applause. This is the story history books rarely tell, the real machinery of terror behind absolute power. If you believe the truth should be told without holding back, subscribe. I am Crown and Dagger, and this is what really happened. But Rome was not the only empire that perfected the art of human suffering. There is another civilization whose punishments made even Romans look merciful. Wanting to tell that story? Let me know in the comments. And if you made it this far, drop a like so I know stories like this interest you. See you in the next historical nightmare.